1. The genesis of manipulated war involvement. The orchestration of war through gradual entrapment and media manipulation is not novel. Historical records from 1939 reveal deliberate efforts to entice the United States into World War II under the guise of defense. These efforts involved a tripartite strategy. First, preparing domestic sentiment under the pretense of American protection. Second, gradually involving the nation through incremental actions. And third, provoking incidents to mandate armed engagement, all while employing propaganda to shape public perception and dilute congressional oversight. Footnote: propaganda and strategic provocation were systematically employed to maneuver the United States into foreign conflict under deceptive pretenses. 2. Currency sovereignty and the Revolutionary War. The American Revolution, though sparked by manifold grievances, found its most pivotal ignition in the denial of currency sovereignty. The British Crown's prescription of interest-free colonial scrip and forced borrowing from the Central Bank of England at interest rapidly indebted the colonies. This policy, central to financial dependency, was later cited by founding figures as the primary catalyst for revolution, emphasizing the role of monetary autonomy in the pursuit of liberty. Footnote: colonial resistance to debt-based monetary imposition catalyzed revolutionary fervor against centralized banking authority. 3. Central banking and perpetual national debt. A central bank's issuance of national currency on a loan basis intrinsically embeds debt within the economic framework. Each unit of currency issued is accompanied by interest, compelling the government to borrow additional currency to pay both principal and interest. This recursive structure ensures an ever-increasing debt load and renders full repayment structurally impossible. The result is a nation permanently beholden to its monetary issuer, locked in systemic fiscal servitude. Footnote: central banking mechanisms structurally guarantee national indebtedness through compounding interest on all issued currency. 4. The Federal Reserve, Foundation and Fraud. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 was birthed not by democratic deliberation, but through clandestine coordination among elite banking families including Rockefeller, Morgan, Warburg, and Rothschild. Utilizing manufactured economic crises, such as the Panic of 1907, they orchestrated public demand for a central bank. Through political subterfuge and strategic timing, the act passed with minimal opposition, establishing a private institution with sovereign control over national monetary policy. Footnote: the Federal Reserve was privately conceived and implemented through elite influence and legislative circumvention. 5. Market manipulation and the Great Depression. The Federal Reserve's inflationary expansions followed by sudden contractions directly triggered the 1920 and 1929 financial collapses. Speculative tools like margin loans, enabled by minimal down payments, artificially inflated stock values. Coordinated margin calls triggered mass sell-offs and bank runs, culminating in economic disaster. These cycles consolidated wealth among insiders while devastating the public, establishing a precedent for economic engineering. Footnote: coordinated monetary contractions and market mechanisms enabled engineered collapses to facilitate wealth transfer. 6. Gold seizure and currency devaluation. In 1933, under executive mandate, all gold bullion was confiscated from the American populace, criminalizing possession and nullifying the gold standard. The result was a fiat currency backed solely by governmental decree, severing all intrinsic value and subjecting currency value to discretionary regulation. This maneuver represented a final decoupling from constitutional money principles and marked a shift to wholly debt-based currency issuance. Footnote: the 1933 gold seizure eliminated tangible monetary backing, establishing fiat currency dependent on state control. 7. The federal income tax, constitutional breach and misconception. Simultaneous with the creation of the Federal Reserve was the implementation of the federal income tax, lacking constitutional ratification. Despite popular belief, no statute explicitly mandates income tax filing or payment for most citizens. Proceeds from this tax largely service interest on debt to the Federal Reserve, not public infrastructure. Thus, taxpayers unwittingly fund their own fiscal subjugation through a mechanism with questionable legal foundations. Footnote: the federal income tax, contemporaneous with the Federal Reserve, lacks constitutional legitimacy and funds perpetual debt service. 8. War as a mechanism of debt and control. From World War I through Vietnam, manufactured pretexts and deliberate provocations, ranging from the Lusitania to the Gulf of Tonkin, have catalyzed military engagements benefiting private interests. Wars expand debt obligations, generate defense industry profits, and justify authoritarian expansions of state power. Each conflict, masked in patriotism, conceals a deeper financial agenda driven by banking syndicates and supported by media complicity. Footnote: war functions as a recurring instrument for debt expansion, resource consolidation, and civil liberty erosion. 9. The rise of the national security state. Post-9/11 policies, including the Patriot Act and the Department of Homeland Security, codified unprecedented surveillance and detention powers. Constitutional protections were curtailed under the guise of anti-terrorism, enabling warrantless searches, indefinite detention, and legal torture. The transformation mirrors historic authoritarian shifts, such as Germany's Enabling Act, and signals the institutionalization of a surveillance state under permanent emergency pretense. Footnote: security legislation post-9/11 institutionalized mass surveillance, bypassed constitutional safeguards, and enabled indefinite detention. 10. Educational control and cultural distraction. Public education, heavily subsidized and centrally influenced, now functions less as a bastion of learning and more as a tool of ideological uniformity. Concurrently, media saturation and consumer entertainment displace critical thought with distraction. This combination fosters docility and conformity, ensuring that the populace remains unaware of systemic structures shaping their reality. Footnote: educational and entertainment systems jointly suppress dissent and reinforce institutional narratives through mental conditioning. 11. Continental integration and sovereignty dissolution. Agreements such as the North American Union and its proposed currency, the Amero, threaten national sovereignty under the guise of economic unity. These supranational arrangements, modeled after the European Union, advance a centralized global governance agenda. Their implementation, deliberately concealed from public scrutiny, portends the erosion of constitutional frameworks and democratic accountability. Footnote: multinational integration initiatives risk erasing sovereign law and centralizing transcontinental authority. 12. Surveillance, chip tracking, and biodigital convergence. Technologies such as RFID chips and biometric surveillance are increasingly normalized under pretexts of security and convenience. From digital ID cards to implanted tracking devices, the infrastructure of totalitarian monitoring is being built. Future economic and legal participation may become contingent on compliance with this digital apparatus, foreshadowing a dystopian convergence of biology and control systems. Footnote: surveillance technologies serve as precursors to biodigital identity regulation and behavioral control. 13. Consciousness, division, and manufactured identity. Systems of religious, nationalistic, and racial identification function to divide populations, obscuring shared humanity. This illusion of separateness is reinforced by media and institutional conditioning. Awakening to intrinsic unity undermines the psychological foundations upon which power is maintained, threatening the hierarchies that thrive on ignorance and conflict. Footnote: manufactured identity constructs enforce division, whereas realization of unity poses existential threat to systemic control. 14. The power of perception and individual agency. The final barrier to freedom lies in perception. A society convinced of its powerlessness cannot challenge tyranny. Yet within each individual resides the capacity to reject fear, reclaim agency, and realign society toward equity and liberty. History's course is determined not by fate, but by the conscious choices of informed individuals who refuse to comply with illusion. Footnote: liberation arises when individuals reject fear, awaken perception, and act collectively to dismantle systemic deception.